Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to be introducing you to the brush tool and also how to import and use custom brushes. So I've got a new layer opened up, which as a quick recap you can do by clicking on this little icon in the bottom right hand corner, the square with the plus icon in it. So new layer selected, I'm going to go over to the left hand side toolbar about a third of the way down. I'm going to click on the brush tool. Now, automatically at the top of my screen, my brush tools settings have appeared, and I'll run through probably the most important of those. The first one, the icon with the number underneath, determines the brush that we have selected, and we can change that by clicking on the little arrow on the right hand side, and all of our brushes appear. So we've got our most recently used brushes in this panel here, and then we have the folders containing all of the brushes that we have installed. Often this menu appears quite small, a lot smaller than I have here. To change the size of this, go into the bottom right hand corner and you'll see three little diagonal lines. If you click and drag, that will increase the size of your brush panel. So I've got quite a few folders here. I can go through these and open them up, and you can see we've got all different brush types available to us. Now, I'm just going to use the general brushes because everybody has those in Photoshop by default. I'm going to click on this one here. At the top, I can change a couple of settings. With this slider here, for example, I can change the size of my brush, like so. I can change the hardness, which is how blended the edges will be. And this little icon here allows you to rotate and shrink the brush. So if I maybe choose one like this grass brush here, I'll make it quite big. You see that it's kind of sloped down on an angle. If I click and drag this arrow around, you can see that angle now changes. If I get my general brush back and I click and drag on one of these little circles, you can see that my brush is now more elliptical, so it's actually squashed the brush. And you can use those settings to satisfy whatever needs you have. What we can also do is change how our brushes appear. So if I open up one of the big brush palettes again, I have my settings so that I see the tip of the brush and the number. That's personally what I find most useful. However, you may not like that, and you can change how your brushes are viewed by going up to this little cog in the top right hand corner, and when we click on that, you'll see three options: brush name, brush stroke, and brush tip. If I click on brush name, you see that my settings have changed. The name now appears next to each brush. If I go back to those settings and click on brush stroke, you can see that I have everything. I actually see what my brush would look like if I dragged it out. But I actually have those disabled because I find this more useful. So with my brush selected, I can close that down. I can change the color over in the color menu in the top right hand corner of my screen. So let's select maybe a red, and I can start painting like so. Control Z will undo, nice little helpful shortcut. If I go to the opacity setting and reduce that, it reduces the opacity of my brush, so I can layer up different effects like that. One useful feature that we won't actually be using for our project video, but it's quite a quirky little thing. If I just reduce the size of my brush there, and I'll bring the opacity back up, is we actually have symmetry, and it's this little butterfly icon at the end of the toolbar. And when I click on that, I can choose how many lines of symmetry I want. So in this case, I might choose dual axis, which is going to put a cross on my page. There we go. You can choose where you want that symmetry to be. I'm just going to click on the tick here. And when I start painting, you can see that, as you might imagine, with lines of symmetry, I can replicate and create a pattern. So, real nice and effective way of creating graphics, for example. I'm just going to add a new layer and delete layer 1. And I'm going to delete that symmetry by going to the select tool here about 3/4 of the way down, drag a nice big box over that and hit delete. There we go. So back to the brush tool, going to click on that. We can actually change loads of settings with the brush tool. We opened up our brush palette and you can see we can change a couple of settings in the top here. but all of our big important settings are in this little folder with the brush icon on it. When I click on that, a menu should appear on the right hand side. And now we have our brush stroke and see a preview of our brushes, but we have a lot more settings now. So I can change scattering, for example. Let's drag that slider up and it changes how much the brush kind of jitters up and down. We can change color dynamics like so. Let's maybe change the hue jitter and the saturation jitter. So now when I drag my brush, the color kind of bounces back and forward at a few different tones. So if we bring that all right down, the effect is a lot more subtle. This is really useful for when you're building up foliage or environments and you just want a bit of randomization in there. Let's bring those all down. And you can see it's now back to normal. In fact, we can disable all of these by just unchecking them on the left-hand side. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to delete that layer by going to the little bin down in the bottom here. Yeah, delete that. I'm going to add a new one. Now, the reason why you will not be seeing all of the brushes that I have here is because these are custom brushes that I've downloaded and installed. And you can find custom brushes from a number of different websites. Brusheezy is probably the most common one. You can also download them from a code you get in certain concept art magazines. But once you download your brush palette, it's really easy to install them. If I go to where I have mine downloaded, which is in my assets folder, Photoshop brushes, here we go. Here's a load of brushes files that I've downloaded, and I'm going to be uploading a few of those to a file for you to use for this project. To bring them into Photoshop, it's real straightforward. Open up our brush panel, go to the little cog where we change our brush name and preview, and we go down to import brushes. We find our file, click on it, click on load, and it will appear. I'm going to click cancel because I haven't downloaded any new ones. So that's how you make them appear here. And you should only have to do that once. So when you quit and close down Photoshop and maybe even close down your computer, your brushes should still appear here. You only have to do that once. But there we go. That's brushes and custom brushes in